join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping the palms joined. With palms down. All right, good evening, everybody. Good to see you all here. Hopefully you're here under your own volition and nobody dragged you here. Anyone get dragged here? No? All right, just making sure. There's a beautiful teaching from Shunryu Suzuki, also known as Suzuki Roshi. He was a Japanese Zen priest, went to San Francisco in the late 50s, I believe, took over the San Francisco Zen Center, really built that for a handful of years, and he shared the practice with what was in San Francisco at the time. So San Francisco in the 60s, we all know what was in San Francisco in the 60s. If you don't, just Google it and you'll have some fun reading a bit. But so here's this very traditional Japanese Zen priest, and he went into a population and a demographic that was very different than what he was accustomed to in Japan, and drastically different from the existing population at this Japanese Buddhist temple at the time. And I just give it a little bit of context. I don't bring it up really to talk too much about that, but he, to this day, is probably my favorite teacher to learn from for many reasons, just a practice standpoint, but also just his ability to share Buddhist teachings with a population and a group of people that were pretty brand new to Buddhist teachings. And obviously with Dharma Bum Temple, that's a lot of what we've seen over the last 15 years is it's a place for people to learn and start. It's also a place for people who've been at it for 30 years and, still struggling, trying to get through. But I bring it up, again, not to talk about him or the place, but the teaching and what's known as beginner's mind. And it's, I think, well, if you're brand new, then this is really easy because, you're a beginner. So with regards to Buddhist practice, you really don't know much. And that's kind of where you want to stay with Buddhist practice always. And the idea behind this is that what you're learning and what you're hearing and what you're exploring, you're really hearing it for the first time always. And what that means in practice is that even though you may hear the same teaching, for example, over and over and over again, let's say somebody just walked up to you tomorrow and said, be kind. And every day for the rest of your life, somebody walked up to you and told you to be kind. That's the exact same thing every single day, right? Someone telling you to just be kind to people. But that will mean something different to you every single time you hear it, because you will be in a different mental state. You'll be in a different emotional state. There may be days where you'll be very welcome and open to somebody telling you to be kind. And then there's days where somebody tells you to be kind and you might want to punch them. So, I'm sure nobody here would ever do that, but just in case. But somewhere along those lines, the things that we hear, the things that we receive, the things that we learn are different based on where we are at our journey, our spiritual path, our cultivation of kindness and compassion, and all those great Buddhist things words that we throw out there. But the practice is to have this beginner mind that you're learning something and you're hearing something for the very first time. Anyone been angry at someone or something for 10 or 20 years? If every hand in this room isn't up, you're all lying for the most part, right? So that would be a perfect example of the exact opposite of beginner mind. The fact that you have been angry at someone or something for 10 minutes, 10 years, 40 years means that you are reliving that over and over and over again in your heart and in your mind. Therefore, it's not brand new. Now, it happened a long time ago, but you're still carrying it. So it's not being seen for the very first time. It's being held on to very tightly. And that's difficult. That's painful. That can be a lot of torture, physically, mentally, emotionally, especially if it's something that was pretty traumatic. A lot of us have dealt with traumas and difficulties in our lives, and those are very real. Those are things that have happened, and those are not things to take lightly or discount or overlook. They have occurred. I spent 25 years working with trauma survivors, so I get that. I understand it, at least from the outsider's perspective. But what it also means is that you're reliving, you're retelling a story over and over and over again. And that's causing that present day, present moment trauma. And it could be extreme, intense trauma, or it could just be an argument with a friend or, something that is trivial that you'll probably get over at some point in time. But either way, coming back to this beginner's mind, the practice is approaching every moment, every day, every situation as if it's never occurred before. Now, there's a little gray area here because, this idea, for example, that if there's a fire, you got the stove on and you got flames going. Well, in one way you could argue, beginner's mind, you don't know if that flame is hot. So every day you might just keep putting your hand in that flame and say, well, I'm practicing beginner's mind. That would not be wise, right? So there are things that we discern in our minds. There's knowledge, there's wisdom, there's conventional practical experiences that it helps to realize what could cause pain and what can keep us safe, right? If there's lots of cars, you probably shouldn't start walking across the road. So these types of things are important. It's not just being oblivious to what's happening. But when it comes to holding on to things mentally and emotionally, having a beginner's mind approach can be really beneficial. So with that, we'll go ahead and we'll start a meditation practice. For those who are new or maybe joining us for the first time, a couple things I'll tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you, right? You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is it working or not working? Am I doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit and we're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. The practice of meditation is learning to get quiet and still within all the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, it helps slide to the front third, pushing the stomach forward. Allows the back to straighten. Shoulders relaxed. Same thing if you're on a bench or a chair. Just pushing the stomach forward, relaxing the shoulders. Hands can be on the knees or the lap, whatever's comfortable. If you need to move during meditation, simply move. Movement doesn't make you a bad meditator. It just means your leg hurts or you have an itch. I will guide us as we begin. We'll settle into a little bit of silence. We should be done by about midnight. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed, whatever's comfortable. Start with taking 3 deep breaths slowly. And eventually, settling into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. Expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. letting go of expectations, letting go of judgment from the practice, just sitting, breathing. Learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, just sitting, breathing. Keeping the mind alert, aware of each sound, each thought, each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move, And most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after, compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet and calm and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, it's nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands across the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with our own minds and our own mind's reaction to an external situation. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us. He began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means very simply for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in and where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's what we get. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way we responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your days. And so all we're working on is closing the gap where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. Imagine going a day without being disturbed by someone. Imagine going an hour without being disturbed by someone. Most of us won't even make it home tonight before we're disturbed. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun. Meditation, Buddhist practice, is not an escape. It's direct perception into the present moment. And very often that present moment is quite painful, difficult, challenging. Very often that present moment is quite peaceful, beautiful, simple. But our perception of the present moment doesn't change what's actually occurring. And so this practice is learning to wake up to what is occurring moment to moment to moment throughout your days. And learning to respond to each moment with kindness and compassion. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice free. Sitting, breathing, becoming aware of what you think, what you say, and what you do every moment. So all we're working on is learning to stop trying to control everything and everyone around us and work on controlling our mind and our reaction to the world around us. And when we do this, life gets simpler because we're not so affected and impacted by every little thing around us. And that's difficult to do. I hear a lot of people ask questions, what about these days, with the pandemic? Prior to the pandemic, people said, well, what about these days? And prior to that, it was, well, what about these days? There's always going to be something that creates tremendous stress, chaos, fear, worry. Now, granted, we're in one that's probably quite more extreme than what any of us have ever experienced. But the message is that there's always going to be challenges and difficulties that we face in our lives. And those challenges and difficulties just change. This one's unique because in many ways it impacts all of us in the exact same way. And at the same time, it impacts all of us completely differently. But either way, we're all impacted by what's going on. And so it's an opportunity as you go through your days to recognize how are we bringing kindness and compassion into our relationships with family, with friends, with community. How are we responding? Because that's what we can control. That alone is hard enough. Trying to control our responses to the external environments and conditions. So we practice. And again, that's why we call it a practice. And for me, that's why the beginner mind teaching is so important, because from a Buddhist practice perspective, specifically, beginner's mind is recognizing that it doesn't matter how long you've been at this stuff. If this is your first day or you've been at this for 40 years, every day we are continuously learning to be kind and gentle and compassionate and loving and forgiving towards ourselves and towards others. So there's no graduation from Buddhism. There's just endless practice of trying to be kind. And the more we're able to set down some of the resentments and frustrations and difficulties that we've carried mentally and emotionally for so long, the easier it is to move forward. But when we carry these things so long, it can really just weighs you down. It really does. So with that, I'll pause. For me, I always really prefer just to respond to questions you might have. Meditation, Buddhist practice, anything that you're sitting with. And I'll use the rest of our brief time this evening to respond to your questions, your thoughts. And we'll go from there. Yeah.
So the one of the intro to Buddhism books I'm reading is currently talking about intention and understanding.
Yes.
And I know there's a question here somewhere.
That's right.
I'm not entirely sure where it's going, but what it made me think about was just some of the societal conditioning, such as it's the thought that counts, something like that, which essentially this was describing as that's not the point of how we should be thinking. Having good intentions really doesn't matter if the outcome and how you affect others. And I'm probably not getting the full scope of this, but
just ramble. It's perfect.
It made me think about too, mistakes I've made in my past relationships, and one of the big things was, oh well, my intent was good. I didn't intend to hurt you.
Sure.
And so this is just kind of reframe how I kind of think about that. So we'll just kind of be curious, your thoughts on that subject.
Yeah. Your past relationships or intention?
Both.
Yeah, both. It's a good question, good ramble. It's fun to. I've always found it fun, especially when and for those who didn't hear our millions of YouTube followers, the question really started with in one of the Intro to Buddhism books you're reading. You're reading a lot about intention and understanding, and then tying that into your own personal experience, past relationships, mistakes you've made, things like that. And so I've always found it first a really I used the word fun and I kind of laugh because it's not that fun to wake up to like what mean, miserable people we were to others. It's not fun, but I use fun because if I hate myself for the things I did in the past, that would not be of any value, right? If I looked at all the harm that I've caused people, I would hate myself to no end. So I have to look at the harm I've caused people in the past and recognize that, as my master used to say, recognize what you did was without the practice of loving kindness and compassion and these things that we look at, and vow to not do them again. And I think that vow to change our behavior and our actions is incredibly important. But the kind of question or idea you bring up around intention is that, yes, we can be well intended with our thoughts and our words and our actions, and yet be coming from a place of selfishness or greed and still cause tremendous harm, right? I think this is a very broad generalization, but very rarely when we do things that harm others, we didn't intend to harm them. We actually just intended to look out for ourselves. So again, this is a very broad generalization, but if I think of anything I've ever done in the past, which is a lot, that harmed somebody else, I didn't start that action, whether it was thoughts, words, or actions, with the intention of harming this person. I did this thought, words, or action because it benefited me, right? It was a selfish, greedy thing to do, all about me. And then because of that, someone over here gets hurt, and then I turn and say, I'm so sorry. I wasn't meaning to hurt you. No, I actually wasn't even thinking about you. I was only thinking about me. Is this making sense?
Yeah.
Right? And so I think that's a little bit differently potentially, because I have a general idea. If you're reading Intro to Buddhism books, it's talking about right intention. But I think this part is also to understand that when we look at intention, it starts with right understanding, right view. And this is the first step on the Eightfold Path. Okay, just a brief, for those who aren't familiar, Four Noble Truths, the first thing the Buddha taught. He said, life is filled with suffering. Doesn't mean all of life sucks. It just means you're going to suffer a lot. Discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction, other translations of the word suffering, right? We're going to struggle a lot in our lives. Most people at this stage of our lives, we get that part. There's going to be a lot of joy and happiness and things like that also, but none of us are here because our life is filled with joy and happiness, right? We'd all be sitting at home right now if that were the case. We've recognized the suffering. The second thing is, what's the cause? The cause is the greed, the anger, and the ignorance. The third noble truth, is the ending of suffering. This is liberation, freedom from suffering, suffering less, having a good day, right? And the fourth is what's known as the Eightfold Path. And this is very clear teachings from the Buddha on what are these 8 things. And they are to have the correct views, thoughts, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. This is our body, speech, and mind action throughout the day. Okay, I ran through that very quickly, but the Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path, you can Google it. It's all there. It's free. And, anything you Google in the first 2 or 3 pages will be pretty good, right? So when it comes back to intention with understanding, the correct view, that's really the first step on the Eightfold Path. So when we have an intention, we have to look at what is the view, what is the understanding of that intention. And is it coming from a place of self, benefit me, or is it coming from a place of how does this impact others? Make sense so far? Absolutely. And the other thing, to not ramble too much, but the other thing is it's important to understand that even if our intention in a beautiful way, right? Forget the whole, like, I was intending, it was all about me, and now you hurt, right? Setting that part aside. We could have really beautiful, pure, selfless intentions come from a really good-hearted place, but we still don't know how others will respond to that. So the practice is to recognize what is our intention with everything we do. The word karma means action. And so the Buddha said, be mindful of your karma, your actions, and look at your intention. What do you think? What do you say? And what do you do? This is how we generate karma. What are we thinking? What are we saying? What are we doing? What are we a part of throughout our day? And is that intention of body, speech, and mind, thought, words, and actions, is that intention come from a place of it's all about me, or it's all about others? And if we look at that intention, that'll really help you throughout your day make decisions to be kinder, gentler people. But like I said, even if that intention, or I started to say, even if that intention is really beautiful and it's not about you, you don't know how other people will respond. But more often than not, we're going to find things go smoother if our intentions are not driven by greed and selfishness. So intention is everything. And yeah, the expression of it's the thought that counts, and you can use that a million different ways. And in fact, I just said it to someone the other day, but very often we think something, then we say something, and then we do something. So not always, and it happens really quick, but we have a thought, we have words, we have actions. Often you could have a thought that's really terrible, but then your action is gentle. You could have a thought that is really angry towards someone, and then your speech remains silent. So, yeah, helpful?
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, good question, good thoughts. Other thoughts, questions? Yeah, Al.
When you were talking about the beginners, whatever, that's a new term to me.
Yeah.
So you said you don't have to keep touching the flame every time, because it's always going to hurt you. So
Yes.
there's no sense in that. What if there's a person, place, a thing? Every time you encounter it, it's unpleasant. Why can you kind of categorize them with the flame?
Right.
Or do you?
Yeah, and that's a good question, and that's kind of that discernment that is required, where there's no simple answer to this, but there's a recognition that if that's why to me the flame is a great metaphor, because that flame, it could be a person, could be a place, right? It could be a thing, something that we know over and over and over again causes harm. I mean, fire is hot, and every single time you put your hand in that flame, it is going to burn. There's no well, maybe it won't, right? Every single time. And so, again, beginner's mind not being this oblivious, clueless, just floating around, zombie, but an awareness that says, look, if this person, for example, every time I interact with them is like a flame and causes me pain, then maybe I'm not in a place where it's healthy enough for me to interact with them, right? We have, just twice a week in person here, but pretty much everyday recovery groups, right? So anyone battling any addiction, right? If you're especially early on in recovery, and you have an addiction to alcohol, probably not best to hang out in bars every night, right? The same idea. Just walking into the bar maybe doesn't burn the hand. But as you get later and later in the evening and closer to, ordering that drink, then your hand starts to get warm. Next thing you know, it's on fire. So there's a discernment. We have to use some wisdom, ideally, that says, I'm not going to put myself in situations that cause harm. And I think that's very often, not just for you, but for anybody who might be new, very often people have this kind of misconception that, Buddhist practice means you just become kind of like a doormat and that you're just like, you don't care about anything and it doesn't matter what happens. No, everything matters and you care about everyone. So, if you're in unhealthy relationships with a person, place, or thing, then be mindful of that relationship and, if at all possible, remove yourself, from it to protect yourself too. Does that help?
Very much.
Yeah. Because, we are just human and we can only handle so much, right? So I know we talk a lot about, being patient and understanding others, but at some point in time, if interacting with someone is just causing you tremendous suffering every single time, there's no need to keep jumping into the flame. Distance yourself if it makes sense, Yeah.
Just on that, isn't also beginner's mind about coming to a mundane experience that with a new mind? Like, I've always thought of it as like making something that we typically deem habitual and nothing like wondrous again. And I don't know.
Sure. Yeah, no, great.
The other side of that coin would be like looking at the flame and going, oh, that's a flame, and then kind of playing with it as if it was new. But I'm just.
Yeah, no, I get it. And my guess is from the question, you've read Beginner's Mind stuff.
So, yeah, but I'm wondering if, yeah.
No, I get it. So here's the thing. It's ultimately, if you're looking at, to me, the way I ultimately perceive Roshi's teachings on Beginner's Mind is that nothing is mundane.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is kind of what you were saying, is that the mundane is wonderful, is exciting, is magical. Like, this is it.
Mm-hmm.
This is the wild experience, all of it. Sitting here breathing, doing nothing, or sitting in a crowd of 100,000 screaming people. There's no difference. It's all magical. It's all beautiful. It's all what's happening at that moment. So to me, Beginner's Mind is seeing no difference in them and just experiencing them as they occur. But what we tend to do is we seek and crave and desire pleasure and satisfaction and, whatever it might be. And we run from aversion and pain and suffering. And I get all that, right? So we run from things we don't like and we run towards things that we do like. So Buddha referred to these as pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. To me, Beginner's Mind is experiencing them all. Yeah. And being okay with that. Because that's what it is. I don't know if that, not really a question, not really an answer. So just thoughts. Yeah. Yeah, in the back.
Gentlemen, as they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and this gentleman defined it perfectly. That's the parable I tend to fall back on. When, how should I say, exactly what you were describing in your last answer is relevant to me, but I cannot abandon someone I love, like a brother or a parent. You, as much as you experience the unpleasant nature, and as much as I try to remove myself from that situation, I have so many tell me, well, just go, just leave. And I can't, because I won't abandon someone I love who is in need. I have a hard time resolving it.
Yeah.
That's my conflict.
Yeah. No, I hear you. And the comment was, you won't abandon someone you love. And just to clarify, not that you're insinuating that I was saying that, but just,
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
But my situation is when I have other people in my life say, you know, oh, just.
Understood.
Cut the cord and go.
Yeah,
You know, I don't wanna cut the cord and have that other individual fall
sure.
part of it.
Sure. Yeah, and I think, again, without getting into details, because I don't like to know anything about anyone ever, it makes my life a lot easier. I see 600 to 800 people of you a week, and I get, I got my own crap to deal with, let alone everybody else's, right? So here's the practice is to recognize that, again, I know you're not saying this, but it's not about abandoning people you love. It's about recognizing that we must find the practice. The practice is to find in Buddhist teachings what's called the middle path and a balance. And sometimes we can, a lot of people who are I won't go there, but often people can find themselves in these situations where they're trying to be the hero, the savior, or this, ultimate important being. And while they're trying to do that out of love, they're killing themselves. And so finding a balance is incredibly important. And very often, with regards to the example of, say, abandoning someone you love, very often that the person you love and that you're trying to take care of and help may love you the same and wouldn't want you killing yourself. So there's a balance. And that balance is critical. So it's one thing to be there for others and take care of them endlessly as much as you can to no end. But if you burn yourself out, you can't take care of anyone. That's the really great, for me, Buddhist metaphor, Buddhist teachings on the airplane. And when an oxygen mask falls down, what do they tell you?
Put it on yourself.
Yourself first.
Yourself first, and then the child. Because if you can't breathe, you can't help anybody. And so I think it's important to remember that also, that the middle path and that's the emaciated Buddhist statue, that this life of extremes is unhealthy. So find a balance. Whatever that balance is different for everybody. And that's for each person to explore, where they are. And very often we know when we're out of balance, and then we just have to try to find what balance actually is. So, any other thoughts or questions? We'll do one more. Yeah.
This person next to me and I are committed to bringing you to our high school before the school year is over.
Yeah.
This is Rebecca. She's the department chair of the department I work for.
Hello, Rebecca. Nice to meet you. My pleasure.
I want you two to get to know each other, okay?
Yeah, the greatest joy I've had about bringing meditation into high schools and, other facilities for the last probably 15 years or so is that, and I'll close with this thought, which is really relevant to hopefully everybody here, is that if somebody brought meditation or Buddhist teachings into my life when I was 17 years old, I probably would have punched him. I would have hated it. I would have resisted all of this. I mean, first I would have resisted it because I don't want anybody to tell me what to do. Because I'm 17 and I know exactly what to do. Right? And then you're 25 and you're like, well, I'm 25. Now I definitely know what to do. And then you turn 45 and you're like, yep, I got to figure it out by now. So for me, it's, and I say this stuff not, out of some weird like humility place, but the truth is that all of the greed, the anger, the ignorance, all of the precepts, all of the misery that leads one to this path, I have done it and gone through it all. And it sucks. And so when I sit with people here or anywhere, I know that pain. It's different. Every one of us is in a different place. with our pain and our struggles. So, I can't know exactly what you're sitting with or exactly what you're sitting with or exactly what you're sitting with. But again, nobody comes to this path because life is perfect and beautiful. We're all experiencing tremendous pain, whether it's pain from loss, whether it's pain from, abandonment, whether it's pain from anger, right? Whatever that might be, we all have it. And to me, the greatest joy is just sitting with people who are, as sad as it sounds, really struggling and helping them just find a tiny little glimmer of hope. Because I'm sure all of us in this room have known or seen people that just gave up and couldn't do it anymore. And I'm sure many of us in this room have had those thoughts before too. And just said, I just can't do this anymore. And there's always a little glimmer of hope, I believe, that exists in all of us. And we just need some little spark to see that. So, yeah. Anything else before we close? Yeah.
Nothing on a concept or anything, but previously I've noticed in the beginning you bounce to the front. Today I noticed you also turn to the side.
Oh, yeah.
Can you explain why and
Yeah. So, yeah, to close to the question about, I always bow to the front, and then today's the first time you see me go this way as well. So this up here, that tanka, where the flowers are at, that's the medicine Buddha. And so, Buddhism, like all religions and spiritual practices and journeys, have all kinds of different, people, for lack of better ways. But they all represent, they're metaphors, and they represent things and practices. This one is the medicine Buddha, often seen blue, not always blue, but often the lapis lazuli is the healing color that goes along with the medicine Buddha. And so, for 2,000 years, people recite medicine Buddha's name, pray to the medicine Buddha for health, for healing, for illness, when people pass away, for, to have rebirth in the medicine Buddha's pure land and things like that. And so, as you know, we were closed for 16 months after, nearly 14 years. And when we reopened, it wasn't anything I thought about. It was just, we reopened and I did my offerings, and then I turned to the medicine Buddha and bowed to the medicine Buddha. And for me, it was a way to acknowledge and bring to light this pandemic that we have been battling and are still battling for 18 months. And so at the end, you'll hear me say it, but I always now transfer merit to the more than 4 million lives that have been lost and to the family and friends that continue to suffer to this day. And so I turn to the medicine Buddha in my own little ways of prayers and healing to recognize this pandemic and this COVID virus that we're dealing with, which is no joke, So that's why. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. So, all right. So we'll close on that, and we'll do, as I mentioned, now the transfer of merit. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to the more than 4 million lives that have been lost during this pandemic, and to their family and friends who continue to suffer to this day. And to Michael Sheehan during his time of rebirth, and to his family and friends and Annie who suffer at this time. May they all be at peace and free from suffering. May we all be at peace and free from suffering. All right, a few quick announcements before you all head out to go be nice to everyone. Thanks all for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened up this temple about 15 years ago to introduce meditation and Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students, we're just practitioners. We do our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. Just about every night, different practices going on, different people leading. Yeah, nothing out of the ordinary. Coming up, Temple, like I said, was closed for 16 months, so we've reopened on a very limited basis. Just Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday nights from 7 to 8, we have class. Saturday morning at 11. Monday through Friday in the morning, we sit from 8 to 9. Recovery groups, anyone battling addiction, drugs, alcohol, life, whatever it might be. Tuesday night is downstairs and Sunday morning is up here. So the Tuesday recovery group does require an RSVP, as does Saturday morning. Other than that, you can just show up. Unfortunately, the temple is still closed all day. We just don't really have the resources to manage it the way we normally would. So we just shut it down all day and open up for class. Saturday, Sunday it is open 12 to 3. If you want to just come and sit and be in the space. So other than that, yeah, appreciate you all being here. And as a kid who was kicked out of high school, it brings myself and my parents great joy that I get to go back and, bring light to some high school kids. So, yeah, thank you. Thanks all. Be safe, be well, and we'll see you soon.